Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
We've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Monday, July 31st. Let's get to today's top stories. Thank you for being here. Hope you had a great weekend. Former President Donald Trump described Hunter Biden's plea deal as a traffic ticket, while also ripping Biden's crime family and a bunch of mobsters, that is. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West will join me to discuss this and the latest to do with Devon Archist testimony that's happening today. Also, the 45th president is saying that the Mar-a-Lago security tapes were not deleted. They were voluntarily handed over to the DOJ, and that he never told anybody to delete anything. And then later, Devon Archist, Hutton Byron's longtime friend, fellow Burisma board member, was in a closed-door testimony at the House Oversight Committee today concerning President Biden's involvement with Hunter Biden's business deals and so much more. Kyle Brosnan, who serves as chief counsel for the Heritage Foundation Oversight Project, will join me with the latest on all of that. Yeah, it's quite an ordeal. This Monday looking like we're going to have another big week of big news stories, so we better get started. And the big story today, of course, is Hunter Biden's ex-business partner and BFF, Devon Archist, testifying in a closed-door meeting that began earlier today. It seems the Department of Justice didn't like that one bit, not one bit at all, because the DOJ, in the latest not-so-subtle move to hide the truth, actually took a shot at getting Archist, the star witness to the Biden corruption scandals, tossed into jail before he could appear. Devon Archist is the longtime close friend, ally, and business partner of Hunter Biden, and he is expected to tell members of Congress that Joe Biden, as vice president, maybe even as president, was not only present, but an active participant in many of the shady dealings pulled off by his bagman Hunter and his friends. So in one of the most blatant moves yet by Biden's lieutenants to keep the scandal hidden, they were pushing for Archist to report to prison. That, according to brand new court documents and a letter that was sent on Saturday, that's right, an official DOJ letter sent on the weekend. Ha! Nothing fishy about that, of course, is there? Archist was previously sentenced to a year in prison for a conviction in 2022 for a scheme to defraud Native Americans to the tune of, $60 million? Archist has been fighting the conviction and has been out on bail for months now, but his attorney says this latest development is unusual, and he will be filing a formal response by midweek. Now, this is just another bizarre twist, and it's being noticed by those on both sides of the aisle. Listen.
It's odd that it was issued on a Saturday, and it's odd that it's right before he's scheduled to come in to have an opportunity to speak in front of the House Oversight Committee and tell the American people the truth about what really went on with Burisma. So, I don't know if this is a coincidence, Maria, or if this is another example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice, but I can tell you this. The lengths to which the Biden legal team has gone to try to intimidate our witnesses, to coordinate with the Department of Justice, and to certainly coordinate with the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee to encourage people not to cooperate with our investigation, to encourage banks not to turn over bank records, to encourage Treasury not to let us have access to those suspicious activity reports. It's very troubling, and I believe that this is another violation of the law. This is obstruction of justice.
Well, Archist's attorney said his client is aware of the speculation that the DOJ move is an attempt by the Biden administration to intimidate him before he even showed up to face that hearing behind closed doors today. Now, the attorney, Matthew Schwartz, says his client doesn't believe that is why the DOJ is sending its demands on a weekend, but we don't have such a rosy opinion of the DOJ here. Devon Archist's testimony as we speak and the blowback on Hunter, Dad, and the entire Biden clan could be very damaging. It could be a disaster for the entire Democrat Party that tied themselves so closely to Joe Biden, of course, devastating in a way we have not seen in recent years. This could be a real political game changer, and that's why the Democrats are getting their talking points in order, rehearsing them, going over them over and over again to make sure they're good and polished. For example.
Right. I think that there's been a lot of hay made of this, but this is a fairly typical process that goes through. This was an unusual agreement, in part because it's a 24-month agreement, and there's the possibility that Donald Trump will be president. And we know from his presidency how much he weaponized the Department of Justice to go after his enemies and to favor his associates. And so Hunter Biden's lawyers are concerned that Donald Trump, if he were to get the presidency, would weaponize the Department of Justice. And so there is an added calculation to this. But the fact of the matter is that this is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, a Trump-appointed judge. This is a very independent and thorough investigation. And I think that whatever happens in the Hunter Biden case, we can rest assured that it was done based solely on the facts and the evidence, and that there was nothing else to it.
Talk about an alternate universe. Good Lord. It was Donald Trump that weaponized the DOJ, huh? And went after his political enemies. Can I get some examples of that? How about one example of that, please, where the DOJ went after Donald Trump's enemies? That was the biggest pile of horse manure I've heard in quite a while, and that's quite something. It seems to me that the blue team is frightened, and they know the damage that can come from Devon Archist's testimony. And, of course, this comes on the heels of the Delaware disaster where the sugar-sweet plea deal got tossed out by the judge for a blanket immunity deal that she said, I'm not going to buy into that, boys and girls. So you'll hear that term a lot, Trump appointed, Trump appointed, Trump appointed. But what you're also going to hear from the Democrats and the media is that there is, quote, no evidence at all. None. There's no evidence here that Hunter Biden or his father did anything wrong except for that $17.3 million and counting. Here's an example of this ridiculous position. This from Senator Chris Coons, another stool pigeon who somehow said it with a straight face. Unbelievable, but here it is.
Do you think it would behoove the president for him to come out and say, hey, I had no business dealings with my son. My son's issues are my son's issues. Do you think he needs to say that more directly? Because there's a lot of people that believe something else went happen here.
Well, let's be clear about that point, Chuck. There's been a 5-year investigation, 5 years, by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. This investigation started during the Trump administration, and they've come forward with not one shred of evidence tying President Biden to any of this.
It's like Chuck Todd has not one shred of credibility. Neither does Chris Coons, for that matter. Oh, and how about former Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill? Here's what she had to say about all of it. So intriguing. Here it is.
What accusations and arguments do you think they're going to make, given this didn't go exactly as planned today?
Well, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. They are going to try to indict a father for loving his son who has been addicted to drugs and or alcohol, and without evidence of the father doing anything other than loving that son.
Oh, please. Life's tough all over. Father, for loving you. What is that drivel? That is just drivel. All right? Stop it. Why is that woman on TV? What credibility does she have? Kicked out of Missouri for being a stool pigeon herself. Oh, and poor Hunter and poor Joe. He's just loving his crack addict son. Stop it. So that's all he's guilty of doing wrong. Otherwise, there's just no evidence he'll did anything wrong. Well, except that massive paper trail of text messages, emails, eyewitness testimony, $17.3 million and counting. Other than that, nothing to see here. It's like the Democrats and media think the only evidence that is viable is having Joe Biden on camera receiving money directly from a CCP spy chief, saying audibly that he is committing a crime by accepting the bribe. Oh, and they did accept money from a CCP spy chief, by the way. But yeah, that's not evidence either, apparently, to the Democrats like Claire McCaskill. But wait, it gets worse. Here's CNN interviewing Congressman Tim Burchett. Tim Burchett said to his face, Republicans just don't have any evidence of wrongdoing by the president. This is what they're saying to these people. Listen.
Look, nothing has been made public yet that shows us all of this. When and if it is, we will get back to you. We'd love to talk to you if you have the evidence to show. But at this point, we haven't seen, the public hasn't seen any of this hard evidence that has been brought up by members of Congress.
I don't know what you have $10 million coming from Burisma, a company. You know, they're accusing Biden of they accuse Trump of doing what Biden actually did, $10 million of bribery. And they fired a guy. I mean, you can follow the money, ma'am. And these are FBI informants. These are FBI.
Right, but it has to be proven. There has to be some proof. You can't just say it happened. There has to be some proof, right?
You can't just say it unless, of course, they're saying about Donald Trump, at which point you can just say any damn thing, or any other Republican for that matter. Then you can say anything you want, and nobody pushes back. These people are such buffoons. This is what you'll hear all week, and for the whole election cycle, that there's no evidence. These are just Republican attacks against the much-beloved and scandal-free President Joe Biden, Joe Robinette Biden Jr., Mr. Perfect, a guy who's just trying to love his crack-addled son. Like this article from USA Today, trying to slime the president. Will GOP attacks on Hunter Biden hurt Joe Biden in 2024? No, Joe Biden will hurt Joe Biden in 2024 by being a dishonest crook. What part of that do you not understand? Oh, and CNN tried again to protect Hunter and Joe. But some guests just aren't going to go along with it. Some guests are going to say, what are you talking about? Here's Republican strategist Scott Jennings putting on his best Gruber impression, going off on that network for trying to protect Joe Biden after he finally recognized his 7th grandchild. Well, whoopee. Listen.
The president has made being a family man a central part of his political identity.
It's not Republicans, with all due respect, who made Hunter Biden into a complete scumbag on this and other issues. The ignoring his own daughter for 4 years, and the president of the United States hanging up a stocking for the dog, and not for his 7th grandchild.
Okay, look, we can also have sympathy for people who are struggling with addiction. Let's keep this conversation respectful.
Listen, I totally agree. And you know where I'm from, a lot of families deal with addiction. And you know who ends up picking up the pieces? The grandparents. And in this case, the grandparents would not acknowledge this little girl. It is offensive. But the bottom line is...
But they have now.
Oh, what a hero. The polling must have been brutal.
Just
the polling must have been brutal.
Oh, the polling must have been brutal, of course. But he was an addict. So if he sold your country out, that's okay. His dad's just trying to love him. If he got 17 or 20 or $50 million, that's okay. Poor little Hunter was on drugs and trafficking in prostitutes. Poor little Hunter. He just misunderstood. Give me a break. That's the part of the story where Hunter and the entire Biden family have tried to pretend that a daughter, by the way, he has with a former girlfriend, is actually his, but I digress. The real meltdown over the past few days was still inside the courtroom of Hunter Biden's plea deal, and the real problem for the Bidens is everything that decision to reject the deal could lead to. So why did the judge say no? Well, believe it or not, CBS, unlike NBC, actually did some journalism on that very important question, and here's what they came up with.
Well, I was inside that courtroom, Margaret, just sitting about 20 feet behind Hunter Biden during that 3-hour hearing. The simple explanation is that the federal judge is always handling plea agreements. They're very familiar documents to her. And when this one hit her desk, she said, hold on a minute. This is not a standard agreement. These are different terms than what I'm used to. And when she pulled that thread, what she found out is that there was no agreement between the defense and the prosecution over whether this deal would shut down the prospect of any future criminal charges. And that is really when the whole thing went off the rails.
Yeah, the whole thing did go off the rails. She's right, Catherine Herridge there. And whether or not Democrats are willing to tell the truth, which clearly they're not, I mean, not like it's up for debate, there are plenty of people willing to step up and do it anyhow. And when you look, the amount of money that may have flowed to the Biden's bank accounts is absolutely obscene from all of this. You know, here's more of this zero proof. Nancy Mace, South Carolina Congresswoman, had this to say.
Hillary Clinton was under subpoena. Those emails were under subpoena when she destroyed them. I mean, it is a complete double standard here. And the other thing I want to say about the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden mess, based on the evidence I've seen so far, I think the number is going to be north of $50 million that we're talking about here. This will go down as one of the most politically corrupt presidents and families in U.S. history. And we've got to show and prove it to the American people. We've got to show them everything that we have.
Yeah, and yeah, apparently that isn't evidence either, especially because the president himself denies all of this. I never talked to my son. All of this denied. So to the media, this can't be true. Joe said it didn't happen. But how just one more denial. I want you to understand how this has continued, because today it changed. We're going to have this in just a moment. It changed today. Now Joe was on the phone, but he was talking about the weather. That's what the Democrats are claiming now. But here from the dementia in chief, Joe Biden, we have this from PBS.
Hunter Biden, your son, was getting paid a lot of money to serve on the board of a Ukrainian energy company facing serious corruption charges. You were the vice president running point on Ukraine. The average Joe hears that and says, that sounds fishy. What's your understanding of what your son was doing for an extraordinary amount of money?
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it. And there's nobody.
Well, you've had a lot of time. Isn't this something you want to get to the bottom of?
No, because I trust my son.
But that doesn't pass the smell test. Like when you're vice president, isn't there a higher standard? Don't you need to know what's happening with your family? Don't you need to put down some guardrails?
Unless there was something that was, there was something on its face that was wrong. There's nothing on its face that was wrong. So look, if you want to talk about problems, let's talk about Trump's family. I mean, come on. This is.
So
you guys are amazing.
You guys are amazing. You were told not to ask those questions. Yeah, listen, Joe Biden is a serial liar. That can actually be proven now, as it has been since he was tossed out of the race for president back in, 1987? And he most likely knew exactly what his son was up to in Ukraine, China, Russia, Romania, and God only knows where else, because it seems he personally benefited greatly from it all. From it all. The media will try to tell you there's no evidence. The DOJ will hide behind open investigations and obfuscations, so they don't need to acknowledge the truth. The Biden crime family is real, and its leader currently sits in the Oval Office as president of the United States, and they're willing to sell this country out to the highest bidder. And how do we know? Because they've already done it. Over and over and over. Coming up after the break, former President Donald Trump has weighed in on what he calls the Biden crime family. We'll discuss that and the latest developments on Devon Archist's testimony with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Straight ahead here on America's Voice Live.